One of the important activities on campus was church related, and women were very, very important in church. In fact, they were at the center of all activities. Activities on campus were just like in Igbo land, women on one side, men on one side. The men at the staff club where they had a drink, chatted, and they were also going to the tennis court, but women were not there, they were in church. And there were lots of activities because the church was at the center of social life. And there were two churches. So the one I'm talking about is the Protestant Church because that's where I belonged. But there was also the Catholic Church, and Catholic Church had their own activities very much like the other. And what was happening in church is women were together. We had prayer meetings, Bible studies, and we also supported people that gave birth and those that were bereaved by attending, festivities in their compound. There were two main groups in church. One was the Women's Guild, and the other one was the Mothers Union. And they had different uniforms. And the Women's Guild and the Mothers Union had the same white blouse that was a traditional part of every uniform in the land, usually made of lace, but not compulsorily. What was important was that it should be white. And then the Women's Guild were considered as the lower group or the step one of belonging. And they had that white blouse and the wrapper that was dark green, printed with buildings that belonged to the association. And then there was a higher group that was more demanding in terms of conditions because the other one was rather open. Mothers Union, that was something that started in Britain with the vicar's wife, Mary Sumner, in 1876, and that is a movement worldwide. The Mothers Union in Igbo land had a white blouse and a dark blue uniform, a wrapper that was printed with the picture of Mary Sumner. So everybody knew that Mary Sumner was the founder of the group. And to belong to Mothers Union, you have to belong to a monogamous marriage. And you needed to be married in church, not only traditional, because obviously people considered the traditional marriage just like people now here go to the registry to be married with for the land's laws. But you needed to have been married in church, wedded. And then you also needed to read the Bible, and the Bible was read in Igbo, and that was a challenge I discovered, not so much to me, but many women, because many people knew how they spoke Igbo freely, they were Igbo speakers, but they couldn't read their own language because they had never schooled in it. And so it was difficult for them, but it was one of the challenges. We all read our portion of Igbo, and then we were, welcomed as members. And so it was very, very active, that group. And so we were, every time somebody gave birth, we used to go to their place, their home, and then dance, welcome the new child, rub our faces with baby powder. Women were dancing, and some of them, these dances, traditional dances, were rather explicit, which I was not used to. In France, people wouldn't have done that kind of thing at all. No. So anyway, people don't go and welcome a baby as a group in France. But not only that, but the way they danced was to tell again how the baby was conceived, and given birth. So they were really describing, not only in words, but also in gestures, about all this. So it was like an initiating dance. And when people were bereaved, they used to go to, we were going to the place and dance and mostly sing hymns, sing, to encourage, to comfort the bereaved family. We stayed usually the whole evening, long into the night, late into the night, and stay there just to occupy the family. It was not crying. It was, a kind of surrendering the situation into God's hands, because death was really part of life, and on campus it was rather frequent because everybody was part of the same campus family. So wherever there was somebody bereaved on campus, people used to go, and the different groups took turns. So one time it was the departmental staff, another time it was the women from campus, another time from women in the church, another time it was women from the hometown of the person. So everybody took turns, so that between the death and the burial in the village, then people had roughly a week of visiting. So we took our turn in the accompanying of the bereaved people. And there were other occasions, but mostly those two. And what was important is there were several occasions where the women were coming together. One was the Mothering Sunday, and that Mothering Sunday was not feasted at home, it was feasted in the church. Women were all dressed in the same wrapper, the one they call umpuroka, and white blouse, and we entered the church as a group, dancing, singing, rejoicing that we are mothers, because that was really, it was more than PhD, for women. They were so glad, so grateful to have been mothers. And they called it not Mother's Day, but Mothering Sunday, because it was not just mothering your own children, but any child around. And that is something that I really loved actually on campus. That was the children didn't belong to only their parents, but to the whole neighborhood, the community. So if your child misbehaved in another street, you might not see it. Somebody else will see it and say, I'm reporting to your mother. And that was a nice safety net for the children. So Mothering Sunday was really a joyous occasion. And the women were receiving flowers, little flowers, from the children. And, it was just rejoicing together. After decorating the whole church with flowers and palm fronds, and then the other occasion was the harvest Thanksgiving once a year at the time of the harvest. That was not only for the women, but women were again central to it. So men and women came to church with produce, with goats, with yam, with all kinds of bananas, plantains, and the church was decorated with some of these things, and then the rest was dropped at the feet of the altar as a gift. And after the church, there was what they called the bazaar that was outside church, where these things were sold at auction. And people rejoiced, and in fact, people took pride in buying those items. And the money that was received at the end was then shared by women. We went to hospitals, we went to orphanages in town and shared the money to support the social life of the less privileged. And that was really good, pleasant occasions. The Bible studies were also important times for the women, and an occasion to discuss things together that people might not have had occasions to discuss with the group outside that. So I remember particularly one time where women were discussing a problem that was a social problem, the case of the Osu, that was a kind of group that was a bit ostracized by others. And people were saying, suppose your son comes tomorrow and tells you that he wants to marry an Osu. I remember the uproar of the women saying, hi! And some wise soul said, well, are we not Christians? These things should not be like that. And it was interesting because it was challenging to look at the Bible and bring social issues to it and say, okay, what would God say? So women were supporting the community, working as a community, supporting each other, and they were also helping each other. There was a woman one time that stopped attending church, and after some 2-3 weeks, women sent some delegates to ask her what was wrong with her, and discovered she was in depression, and after she lost a child, and encouraged her, said, everybody has suffered the same, you are not alone, and she came back to church. So it was a lovely support.